Happy Wednesday, everyone. It's been a little while since we've done a Wednesday word, but God has put something on my heart that I felt was worth doing a Wednesday word about. So I wanted to share that with you today, and of course you can share it with whoever else you would like. So I'll start with this question. How should Christians respond if or when our country goes down a road we do not like? Now, this is an important question because it helps us be prepared beforehand and not act in an overly emotional, reactionary way if or when things take a turn for the worse. I'm not going to hit on everything that could be talked about today, but I do want to bring up one important fact. The historical church has been, is, and needs to be adaptable without compromising character or convictions while trusting in God's sovereign will and ultimate victory. Let me say that again. The historical church has been, is, and needs to be adaptable without compromising its character or convictions while trusting in God's sovereign will and ultimate victory. Now, usually we think of this adaptability in relation to things like evangelism. Churches, obviously this is true of the Great Commission, as it is for every culture and every time period in history. But I want to encourage us today that this is true in the context of how the church lives in the face of increasing opposition, ridicule, and secularism. Here's a few things I want us to remember as we have to adapt. Number one, Jesus' promises. Matthew 16:18. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Jesus will build his church, and no government and not even the gates of hell or Satan himself will prevent that from happening according to how Jesus wants it to happen. That's a promise. Secondly, John 10:14 through 15. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. If Jesus is the good shepherd, he knows us perfectly, and he is going to work on protecting us, guarding us, guiding us as his adopted children through whatever times or cultures we live in. And then finally, John 16:33. I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus promises there two things. In this world you are going to have tribulation, whatever that looks like. But it also promises that he has overcome the world. So that's first, Jesus' promises. Second, the sanctifying role of suffering. 1 Peter 4:13 through 19 says, but rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, or a thief, or an evildoer, or as a meddler. If anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in that name. For it is time for judgment to begin at the household of God. And if it begins with us, what will be the outcome for those who do not obey the gospel of God? And if the righteous is scarcely saved, what will become of the ungodly and the sinner? Therefore, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to the faithful Creator while doing good. Wow. That's number 2, the sanctifying role of suffering in whatever culture you live in, under whatever government you're living under. And then third, the testimony of church history. From the early church all the way to communist countries today, not only has the church survived, but it has grown stronger and sometimes even grown numerically in the face of opposition. Dr. Rodney Stark, who's a Christian sociologist, concludes this in his book, The Rise of Christianity. He says, the ultimate factor for the survival and growth of Christianity in the first centuries of the church was that the central doctrines of Christianity promoted and sustained attractive, liberating, and effective social relations and organizations. These particular doctrines, such as God's love and love for neighbor and God's sovereignty, permitted Christianity to be the most sweeping and successful revitalization movements in history. And it was the way these doctrines took on actual flesh in a hostile world which led to the rise of Christianity. Wow. So let me pose some questions for us to think about. Number 1, do you think the church had to adapt to the social and political situations in the first 3 centuries? Do you think the church survived and thrived at this time? My argument would be yes. 2, do you think the church had to adapt in a post-World War I and post-World War II world? Do you think the church survived and grew strong in faith at this time? History would argue yes. Do you think the church has to adapt in communist countries today? Do you think the church has survived and maybe even thrived there? Yes. So now let me hit a little closer to home here. Do you think the church will have to adapt if things get worse and worse in the United States of America? Do you think the church can survive, grow stronger in faith, and even grow if that were to happen? My answer is yes. Remember, our hope is not ultimately in our government, which is human and temporary, as good as it is, as much as God uses it. But our hope is in the promise and secured victory of the gospel to redeem sinners and transform culture, partly now and ultimately when Christ comes back. Only God can bring this full-scale good to any person or society. And he is using each one of us in the church to bring this about even today. Now that's exciting, and hopefully this little video has been comforting for you as well. God bless you all. Love you. And I hope that this is convicting and, again, encouraging and gives us some direction and comfort as things unfold here in the weeks to come. God bless. Bye-bye.